get started, looks like we have a nice crowd here. So before we get started, I would like to read our land acknowledgement statement that we have here at Blue Sky. We at Blue Sky humbly acknowledge that our programming is being held on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes who made their homes along the Columbia, the Willamette, and the Willamette rivers. So welcome everyone, thank you for joining us this afternoon for an artist talk with Dan Nelken, who came out here all the way from New York City with his lovely wife Adele. Adele back here. It's been a pleasure to have them around this week and spend time with them, working with Dan and getting to know both of them. Before I introduce Dan, I would like to thank our wonderful staff and volunteers. Please raise hands, lovely staff volunteers. Yay. Including our exhibition committee, who works hard to select work that goes on the walls each month at Blue Sky. I'd also like to thank our members, our donors, our institutional funders, including the Joy of Giving Something Fund, the Regional Arts and Culture Council, the Miller Foundation, and the Leonian Foundation, which is really important to the world of photography and to artists in particular because they provide honorariums to artists to help them bring their shows to Blue Sky. So thank you to our funders. I would also like to remind you that next week, Wednesday, 5:30, right, we have an artist talk on Zoom with Berthe Piontek, and her work is next door. So please take a look at her work as well. Go onto our website, sign up for the Zoom talk, 5:30 Wednesday. And also I remind you that March is the last month to enjoy our Pacific Northwest Drawers artists who have been in the drawers for the whole year. And we have a lovely catalog this year that was created for the drawers artists. So you can check this out at the front as well as purchase one. We also have a lovely Dan Nelken catalog too. So please just check that out. So now the reason why we're all here today, I introduced Dan. And I will read a little bit of a biography, introduce. So Dan Nelken is a photographer, visual artist, educator, documentary storyteller, whose portrait-based photographic projects provide a window into the world of communities outside the cultural mainstream, what you see here. His portraits are aspire to accentuate each person's individuality while providing contextual references to communities, cultures, and rituals. His ongoing award-winning project, Headstrong, the Women of Rural Uganda, again that you see here, exemplifies his commitment to this theme, as does his prior major work, Till the Cows Come Home, County Fair Portraits. And we happen to have that catalog here in our library, so you can take a look at that. A veteran studio-based advertising and editorial photographer, Dan Nelken has received numerous domestic and international awards. His work has been exhibited and published widely and is included in museums and private collections. Please join me in welcoming Dan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Even though Molly has already acknowledged all the efforts that the staff, the Blue Sky staff has done in making this show possible, I just want to thank all of you personally for doing such a great job in helping me out to deal with all the bugs that we ended up straightening out. And I also would like to really thank Chris Rauschenberg, who at the last Photo Fest saw my work and recommended that I submit this project to the submission committee. So if it wasn't for Chris, this would be up, on the wall. What I want to say is this work, Headstrong, the Women of the Rural Uganda, is a project that has required 4 trips to Uganda within a 3 years period. Originally, when my wife and I went to Uganda as volunteers for an NGO called Oysters and Pearls Uganda, and the way we ended up becoming volunteers was that in 2016, my wife Adele decided to pivot away from her corporate work and focus on working for nonprofits. And it turned out that an acquaintance of ours had founded a NGO called Oysters and Pearls Uganda, whose mission was to teach technology skills such as gaming, robotics, to blind and sighted Ugandan, high school age Ugandan students. And we were asked if we would be willing to go to Uganda for a few weeks in January of 2017, and for Adele to teach critical thinking to the blind students while they asked me to take photographs of the classes and the activities, and to teach photography to those students who wanted, during the spare time, to learn photography. And the photography was done on cell phones. And interestingly enough, I hope I'm not too digressing, is that when I had my first class with the students, the first thing I asked them was, what do you want to learn? And just about all of them said, well, how can I take a photograph of my friend and not have him turn me into a silhouette? Because of being in a sunny day, when you're dealing with somebody with a dark complexion, as we all know, you just end up losing a lot of details on the person. And it was just great to just say, well, just put them in open shade, and you would be amazed how much detail you can get, just avoid the sun. But anyway, so we are, Adele's teaching classes, I'm taking photographs, I'm getting to know all the teachers. There was about 150 students with about 50 teachers, most of them Ugandans. And I'm photographing, and I am really, I'm impressed by the openness of all the people that I'm coming in contact with. And I'm really impressed by the sense of dignity and self-worth that everybody is displaying. But I also noticed that women seem to be doing all the work.
Like here.
Even more so, because they will really seem to be the backbone of Ugandan society. They seem to be, as somebody said, keeping things together. It is the reason I concentrated, for instance, in the rural Uganda, as opposed to saying headstrong the women of Uganda, is that once you get out of the cities, which has a structure of indoor plumbing and electricity, outside the cities, just about everybody lives in villages. And the villages are mostly mud huts with thatched roofs, with no indoor plumbing and no electricity, unless somebody can afford to be able to have solar panels on their huts. So every day, at least once, sometimes twice a day, the women taking 5-gallon jerry cans, go to the local borehole, fill up with water for home use, for drinking and for all other purposes. Sometimes they will do that 2 or 3 times, depending on the size of the family. And the women are the ones that do it. I've never seen men at boreholes. And the boreholes are not necessarily a short distance away from their village. Some of them could be 1 mile or 2 miles away. So as we are, when we first traveled from all the way from Kampala to Gulu, which is like about a 6-hour car drive, we would, you'd be out in the middle of open fields, didn't see any village, and you would see groups of women all carrying their water with their kids, and you're wondering, how far have they traveled? Where are they? What are they going? And their sense, and as they're walking, 5 gallons of water is about 40 some odd pounds. And to me, it was just a phenomenal thing to watch. And so after the first week or so, I thought, maybe I've been to downtown, to to the central part of Gula, which has the market. Let me see if I could start taking photographs of portraits of women. I also knew that there was just no way that I could possibly just be a documentary photographer and just, kind of like a la Cartier-Bresson, just sneak around and shoot, because that's not what I was interested in doing. So as it turns out that one of my students in the photography class wanted to, Emmanuel, which everybody called Emma, wanted to know if he could be my assistant, because he wanted to be a photographer. And I go, hey, sure, come along, I'll teach you whatever I can. If you have any question, I'll answer them. So I asked Emma what was the best approach in terms of doing that. And he said, well, we could offer to pay them for their time. I'm going, okay, what's an appropriate amount? Because I had absolutely no idea. So we talked to some of the teachers, we talked to a group of people, everybody came up with a consensus, and so Emma and I went into town, and I would say, oh, this woman looks interesting carrying the sugar cane. Emma, would you mind asking her if she'd be interested in being photographed? And just about everybody said yes, which was great. Now I was feeling really good about this. And I get home, venture to New York, look at the stuff, and I realized that I'm really not happy with the results, because the women just seem to be lost in their environment. And I really thought what I had done was really a failure. I mean, it was just interesting for me how you can shoot and think you really have something, and then a couple of weeks later you're looking at it and how disappointed you are because you've just got a totally different perspective. So so I thought really this was going to be the end of it. But what ended up happening is the following year we were asked whether we would be interested in going back to Uganda. And that's when the idea, I thought, okay, maybe I can resurrect this assignment, my personal piece. And I came up with the concept of mosquito netting because I wanted for the viewer to realize that the people were in their own environment. But I didn't want, as I said before, the environment to overwhelm or for the people to be lost in their environment. I wanted the women to stand out. I wanted them to be able to pose any way that they wanted, to stand how they wanted, so that their own sense of self-worth and dignity would hopefully come through with the images. And so next time I went back, got in touch with Emma, told him that if he could come up with if he knew of 2 other women who would be interested in being assistants so that they could approach the women rather than having another man approach the women. And I came back and with 2 light stands, crossbar, mosquito nettings, and started the assignment really all over again. And what began happening is, as I'm talking to some of the women, getting more feedback from other Ugandans, I realized that these photographs were really didn't tell the whole story of who these women really were. And that's when I had the idea of deciding to find a female Ugandan author, a writer, who would be willing to work with me in regards to interviewing the women and transcribing their stories. So I did my research, thank goodness for Google, which makes things a little bit easier. And after getting in touch with a couple of Ugandan authors, Beatrice Lamwaka, who ends up being an internationally well-known author and poet, agreed to be part of this project. So what happened was that in December of 2019, just before COVID, Beatrice joined us in Jinja. And it was a revelatory experience for me because the women, Beatrice had the capacity to have the women open up about themselves. And when you read the stories, there are certain things that you keep running through it. One is that the women who work in the quarry, who are basically selling vegetables, are the ones that find it exceedingly difficult to pay for school fees for their children. In Uganda, schools are not free. There are school fees. Children have to have school uniforms. Children have to pay, the parents have to pay for the textbooks and other supplies. And these women know that the reason that they are stuck economically in the conditions that they are because they themselves did not have a full education. Their brothers might have, because when the budget within the family is limited, the preference is going to be to spend the education money for the male child rather than the female child. So they understood the importance of what education was. And Uganda is, out of curiosity, has anybody been to Uganda at all? How long were you?
I've been there multiple times over the last 10 years.
Oh, that's great. For safaris, for NGO, medical.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. God knows, we see a lot of people who volunteer there. That's wonderful. So you're familiar a little bit in regards to what I'm referring to, and it lacks infrastructure. The corruption within the government is rampant. You have the same president who was elected in 1986 still there. One year when we were there, the teachers were on strike because they hadn't been paid for 3 months because the budget for their education went for the re-election campaign of all the people. So excuse me, I need to get this phone. So, Beatrice's stories. So as I said, it's the education. It's the lack of having the finances for an education that ends up being one of the major stumbling blocks for a lot of these women. Look, you are fortunate in terms of, for instance, you have Elizabeth over here who's blind, who was one of the teachers at Oysters and Pearls, Uganda. When she became blind at 14, she attempted to commit suicide 3 times. And on the 3rd time, her grandmother saw the rope that she was going to use to hang herself and told her that if she kills herself, everybody in the village is just going to remember her as the blind girl who killed herself. And she says that was a turning point in her life in terms of wanting to overcome her blindness, ended up graduating from university, learned and learning how to use a computer and teaching Braille and computer skills to, to other blind students. You've got Adeline, who was one of the teachers, who's into gaming, and as she said, she was fortunate because she came from a professional family, so that educating, from a university was not that big of a strive for her. You've got Charity over here, who basically decided that she really liked being a mechanic, and about, if I'm correct, about 12 years of age, started apprenticing at a garage so that she, could learn the skill. Or you've got Pauline over there in front of the vegetables, who was abducted by the Lord's Resistance Army when she was 12 years old. Now, what I forgot to mention, northern Uganda, there was a civil war that started back in the 80s, in which the Lord's Resistance Army, which ended up trying to create an independent northern Uganda. And Gulu is in the north. This is where a lot of the conflicts happened, and kids were kidnapped, both males and females. The males were taught to be guerrillas. The females were basically to either carry things and to cook and basically to marry whatever soldiers that happened. Paula was lucky because she was able to, as she said, escape after 2 weeks. Pauline over there ended up being, I think she was 14, 12 or 14. Read the story, you'll get the exact age. Was kidnapped, had a child. The husband got killed. She was supposed to get married to somebody else and ended up escaping with her child. And that kind of a trauma is something that is so difficult to overcome, and yet she's working to have that son go to university. She's got a new husband. The resourcefulness that these women have just takes my breath away. It really does. And at this point, as you'll see in the other room, we set up aside the quarry workers. These women break rocks all day long and get paid by the amount of how many jerry cans they fill a day. They average anywhere from 5 to 12 jerry cans a day. A full jerry can is 1,000 shillings. 1,000 shillings is equal to about 33 cents. But again, you can't compare because I think the median income of a Ugandan is less than $900 a year. There is one photograph of Jovia, who's 12 years old, who works at the quarry on weekends so she can pay her school fees. It's because she wants to be a doctor. It's
Heartbreaking.
yeah. And I had one experience in which I came back to Laibi Market, and I bought back photographs of the women that I'd taken portraits of, and brought them out, and all the women, I was really surprised by how happy they were in receiving the photographs. So I found that a lot of them had never had portraits of themselves taken. And Agnes, who was the manager of the market, said, "When do you think you'd come back?" Nobody ever does, you know, and it just let me speak. It just let me speechless. So what I'm hoping to do is for Adele and I to go back in July of this year, connect with Beatrice again, and focus more on professional women who have careers, whether they have shops, whether they're executives, whether they're doctors and teachers, to kind of have a 360-degree economic viewpoint or perspective in regards to this particular project. At this point, if there's any questions, I'd be absolutely delighted to answer them. I answered everybody's question, my God. Yes?
Where did you get the idea for the mosquito netting? Had you ever done this sort of
No.
semi?
No, I hadn't. That's a good question. When we found out that we had the opportunity to go back to Uganda the second time, I knew that I need to come up with something. And one day I'm passing a restaurant in New York City, and they've got lace curtains, and I'm going, I can see the interior, and I can see out, and that's why I'm going, mosquito netting. Because in the hotels where we've stayed in Kampala, they've got mosquito netting around the beds. And suddenly it became, it solved one conceptual thing, and you could say it added a kind of symbolic reference to the lack of medical care that people end up having in Uganda. The thing is, talking about medical care, I'm going to jump to Clementina, who's the opening photograph. She's the midwife who delivers approximately an average of 100 babies a month. And when we got there at around 10:30 in the morning, she had already delivered 3 kids. And this is the birthing room. She's holding the book of all the kids that she has delivered over like a 40-year period, and started when she was 16 because her mother and grandmother were midwives as well. Now, why do you have a midwife? Because in Uganda, a woman has to bring her own bedpan and sheets for the hospital, as well as a lot of them cannot even afford to pay for hospital. So you've got a midwife. On top of that, the hospitals are in the cities. How do you get from a village when you are in labor? The only way of transportation is on a boda, which is a motorcycle, which is kind of like the taxi version of really, and that's what a boda looks like. So you can imagine on a park-marked road, when you're in labor, being in the backseat of a motorcycle, trying to get to a hospital, which is, and the reason we were introduced to Clementina is because we were working with an NGO called Soul, which main impetus is prenatal care and birthing. So they supply Clementina with tanks of fresh water, with gloves and supplies and clean material. And they are trying to build a hospital in this particular village and have an ambulance service. But again, it's these midwives, who are really the central kind of medical care that most Ugandan women are really going to receive when they're pregnant and giving birth.
One more question.
Sure.
The interviews, were they conducted in English?
Some yes, some no. Beatrice knows a number of dialects. There's about more than a couple dozen dialects throughout Uganda, and so teachers would talk to them in whatever language really that they were comfortable speaking to. Something I could never do. Yes?
Yeah, one of the questions that comes up in contemporary photography is who takes the picture of whom?
Yes.
And who is behind the camera? And so I'd like to hear your thoughts on that from
Okay.
your perspective as a
Sure.
white man, as a man in NGO and has no real, has a certain kind of distant connection to Uganda, but talk about that relationship between you, the camera, and your subjects, and if you changed your point of view at all about how you take photographs.
Good question, okay. I've been a portrait photographer for 50 years. And I learned a long time ago that you really need to treat each subject with respect and a sense of humbleness. Whether I'm shooting a CEO or whether I'm in Uganda or any other place. The important thing for me in each one of these photographs was, first of all, the women had to feel comfortable. And so that it required an interaction with me and them in the beginning. I wanted them to decide how they wanted for them to pose, what stance they wanted, how they wanted. And that was the kind of interaction that kind of took place between us, me and them. Does that answer, to some extent, answer your question?
No.
Okay. That's
Because you're talking more as a professional photographer in the way that you approach it. I'm thinking in a cultural sense, just to sort of slice things a little differently. You're a white man in a black country and you're taking pictures of people that you don't know as intimately as you know people from your own family or from your own country. And there is a critical point of view about reassessing who takes the pictures of whom. Should these kinds of pictures, would they be different if they were taken by a Ugandan photographer as opposed to you? And I think that's a
okay. Well,
critical way of thinking about things that isn't, I'm not condemning anything.
I understand. I hear what you're saying.
Fantasy.
The majority of portraits that I take are people that I don't know, to begin with. You can talk about family and the interaction that happens, but the majority of people, I'm meeting them for the first time. Whether it's a personal project, or whether it's an assignment. And I'm not sure that you can say, well, would the Ugandan photographer take it different than me? Then you would have to say, well, would a female photographer take it different than a male photographer? My feeling is that if I approach each person with respect and I am not interested in
Exploiting them.
That's a good word. Thank you. I respect these women, and that's kind of how I'm approaching these images, and that's what I'm been trying to project with it, and how somebody else could do it. I'm sure somebody else will do it. Every photographer is going to photograph it differently.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and but I'm sorry. Just one thing, which brought this up. I got to the point about a month or so ago, 6 weeks ago, when I realized that okay, I'm going back to Uganda again. I'm going to trying to give a more holistic look of these women, of the women there. I needed to have somebody give a overall cultural, social, and historic perspective to this thing. And I knew, because since I started this, I'm leading News from Uganda, and there is a activist named Stella Negayi, who was a professor at the university and became a humanitarian activist, a queer rights activist, an abortion activist, and had been jailed numerous times by the government. And in fact, Penn, Germany, sponsored her to move out of Uganda with her family, with the 3 teenage children, because of, again, the threat of harm coming to her. And I got in touch with her through Beatrice and asked her whether she, to look at the website, read the stories, talk to Beatrice, and see whether she'd be interested in writing, this kind of overview. And we had a Zoom conversation, and she felt that, she said yes. The bottom line is she said yes. But she also felt that it was the first time that she had experienced these Ugandan women telling their stories. So I don't think it's just the photography or it's just the stories. I think it's really the combination of those two things coming together that will give you a more realistic assessment of who these women are. Because like I said, halfway through this, I felt that the photographs alone really didn't tell the real story of who these women were. It was, so that's, hopefully that brings it all, together for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, anybody else?
I wanted to say,
Yeah.
I've been looking at all the women's faces, and they all respect you, and they really want to be where they're at. Where they look like they're looking at you, like saying, thank you, I'm here for you. So, I mean, if you just look at their faces, they're just there, looking at you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes?
One thing that really struck, I'm sorry, my English is not really good, just bear with me. That kind of like got into me was when someone said heartbreak. It's heartbreaking. But when I look at all of these photos, what I see is that they're living their lives. There's a lot of pain, but there's also a lot of resilience.
It's an incredible amount of resilience, yeah.
What do you, like, you have conversations with them, so do you think they want the audience to see the heartbreak and pain through your lens, or do you think they're just?
I don't think they want to see, I don't think they want to see the vulnerabilities. They're too proud for that.
Well, they're
Yeah.
living their lives.
They're living their lives, but their vulnerability really comes through the stories, I think, more than the photographs. Yes?
So is there any movement toward trying to have, I mean, we still have school uniforms, but to have school fees be paid through taxes or something, or is the government just doesn't care about the people, they just put money in their own pocket?
It's, a number of years ago, a law was passed that certain schools, there theoretically would be no school fees. But the issue is that you still had to have uniforms. You still needed and those schools had classes of 40, 50, 60 students. There are numerous private schools throughout Uganda, which is evidently for people who can afford it, but because a lot of people know the inadequacy of the public education there, because everything is by what? The issue that a lot of the blind students had, for instance, in Oysters and Pearls, was things were written on the blackboard, the students who were writing them down, the blind student would say, what is it? Find from the others, you know, ask a student. I mean, it was just not that kind of empathy from the teachers. On top of it, I found out that, 40% of the teachers don't even have a college degree that teach. So a lot of it is really rudimentary education. Look, a number of these women, which would be equivalent to maybe 6th or 7th grade, where they cut up. The only thing I know how to do is count money and write my name. We're not talking about reading. We're just talking about, money and being able to write your name. Yes.
The blind children and the sighted children were being taught side by side
Yes.
in the same room
Yes.
by a sighted teacher.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, which is one of the reasons why Oysters and Pearls, Sandra Washburn, who founded that, when she was there as a volunteer for something else and saw what was happening, and that's why she created this NGO with the idea that if the blind students could communicate and work with a computer, it would allow them not only to learn, but to be able to have a job and to be able to support themselves and not be reliant on family throughout the rest of their lives.
But other than the quarry, are there jobs in these villages?
There are no jobs. These women gather firewood. Christina will make charcoal from it and send the charcoal as well as the firewood. The women will either grow their own vegetables and produce. Sometimes they will buy, as they said, vegetables are really cheap, and so they will buy it and resell it. They create their own market.
So it's a barter system more than it is.
I'm not sure it's really so much of a barter system. It's like, I've harvested, I've got extra vegetables, I will sell you these, for X, and then I take it to the market and I sell it for Y.
There's currency.
That's right. There has to be currency.
500 shillings for the tomatoes.
Yeah.
Could you see doing this work with the mosquito net scrim in any other location? I mean, obviously, if you're going back to Uganda, I'm just curious.
I haven't thought about that. It's an interesting idea, and to tell you the truth, I've been so immersed in this particular thing that
I mean, it struck me that this would be perfect for, and maybe it's because you're wearing Ukrainian yellow, but it struck me this would be perfect for documenting war. That you can show the impact on the person without having that person be totally devolved by the background. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, thank you for letting me think about this idea. Yes. Anybody else? Yes.
I'm curious to hear a little more about how the women responded to seeing your portrait.
I've never seen anybody so overjoyed looking at my photographs in my life. I had, there's a custom, especially about older women, in which when they greet a man, the women get on their knees. Yeah. There is now a kind of a conflict between the current generation and the older generation in regards to that. But it's disrespecting your elders if you don't go on your knees. I had that. Christina did that when she was so happy. She got on her knees, and it was. You can tell my reaction just thinking about it, how embarrassing, it was. But as I said, everyone that I gave photographs, and the quarry women to everybody else, was just like, oh wow, you know, oh, she's not here, can I take her picture? You know? Will she get it? Who knows? But yeah, it was, yeah, I gave like 5 by 7s. Yes?
Well, this came up also with our portrait show that we had last month, World Short Group, which was that the people that he photographed, many of them didn't have photographs of themselves, but also didn't have photographs where they were really seen.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just like getting a photo booth picture or something in the, the commercial photographer on the corner. I think
Yeah.
the care and respect that you're giving everybody makes it not just a picture of them, but a picture of them.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Very good comment.
yeah, yes.
Did you meet their families?
No, in most cases, I did not. Look, at one point, I thought it would be great to meet their families, do family portraits, but it was just not feasible, it really wasn't feasible. I tried it a couple of times, and it just, because suddenly you're getting the husband involved, and there is, with a lot of what the women are telling, I mean, there's tensions between their husbands, and them. I mean, a lot of women say, I'm the husband of the household, because their husbands cannot work for one reason or another. And I also thought that it would dilute, by having the portrait, then you're getting into kind of a story, a kind of more of a documentary aspect of it, and it would dilute the women themselves, which is really where, I was trying to focus on.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was interested in, whether spouses would have maybe been a little jealous in certain situations, whether children might have reacted
The children would probably have been happy to participate, but again, I felt that by adding more of the look, there's a number of in the quarry, the children are with the mother. Either the baby's on the back, while they're working, or once they become toddlers, the other kids get together and just run on barefoot and play in the quarry, and the thing is Uganda has, as I might have mentioned, one of the highest birth rates in the world, with the average age of being 15.8. The median age is 15.8 years of age, and part of the woman's self-worth is how many children she can have. Christina had difficulty, didn't get pregnant right away, and thought she would be a failure. And finally got a child, and she was really happy and wants more. It's part of the culture and how the women see themselves.
But do the men work? I know this is about women, but are their husbands working?
Some do. A number of them, I won't say a lot, a number of them, the women have left their husbands because the husband was too abusive. Okay. A few of them, their husbands have had accidents where their legs have been, they've lost a leg and cannot work. So how much the other husbands, she says, he's a drunkard, and I moved back with my family. How many of them have, quote, supporting spouses? I have no idea. No idea. Yes?
How did you connect with these women? Did you go to them? Did they come to you?
I went to them.
Okay, I'm curious because you say these are rural.
That's right.
Some of these backgrounds look pretty urban.
Yep. That's true. They do. They've got signage. Well, this one, which is Laibi Market, that is the market behind her. But there's no electricity there. There's, the water again, it comes from a bore. In fact, there's a borehole nearby in the market where in the evening, all the women start gathering to fill up their jerry cans. So rural doesn't necessarily mean open fields. You'll see, like I said, you will see villages, but there is no indoor plumbing. There is no electricity. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
I'm curious about your previous work that you did. This is a multi-year, very complex, a lot of effort and a lot of time went into this. I'm wondering what previous projects you have done. What built
Well,
you
in
up to do this?
2005, in December, I had a show at the old Blue Sky Gallery called Till the Cows Come Home, which was County Fair Portraits. And that happened. Look, just about all of my long-term projects come up kind of serendipity. If Adele hadn't decided, to work for nonprofits, I would have gone to Uganda, and this would not have happened. If Adele and I hadn't 20, 30 years ago bought a house up in the Catskills, and the neighbor said to me, "Hey, you're a photographer. You should go to the county fair. It'll be good. It'll be good photograph." And to tell you the truth, I said, "Well, where is it?" And he goes, "Oh, it's in Walton." I go, "Where is that?" "Oh, it's about an hour drive." I go, "I just drove 3.5 hours from New York to get here. I'm not going to drive another hour." And the neighbor, God bless him, the next year said the same thing to me. And just to placate him, because he was a really great neighbor, I went with my Hasselblad and on the last day, and I entered and I'm going, what an ass I am. I should, whoa, this is great opportunities. So the following year, I'm checking out where all the county fairs are happening, and I'm setting out to take photographs. But again, did I have a particular project in mind? No. I was doing just the still lives. I was photographing the animals, I was photographing all the competitions with the fruits and the vegetables that the 4-H club does. And one weekend, I invited one of my assistants to come up because I thought she'd be interested in this, in taking photographs as well. And I'm in the chicken booth where all the competition chickens are. And I'm taking a photograph of a chicken, and Dawn, who was my assistant, tasked me on the ship. "I promised this girl you're going to take her picture." I'm going, "Dawn, I don't want to take her picture." But I thought, okay. I did 3 shots. I look at my contact sheet and I'm going, whoa, what am I missing? I'm missing the people. And that was the turning point for that. Then I thought, oh, okay, there's really something here. And so, this is kind of how all of my, most of my projects, come about. So and that again took a number of years. Going back to the same fairs, again, giving photographs, creating relationships, with people. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to say that as you talk about your process, you say, well, it's just serendipity, but it starts off with serendipity,
Yeah.
and then it gets deeper because you're trying to get to the heart of it.
That's right. Yes.
And in both of these projects, the way you describe them, you say, okay, well, my first surface effort didn't go deep enough. How can I get deeper? And I think that's the thing you pay attention to. Not that the first time you meet somebody you hardly know them.
Yeah.
It's that then you do get in there.
Yeah. You try to get as deep as you possibly can. And sometimes, I would look. There's a number of especially in the quarry, of a number of women I've gotten back and photographed them again. Just to see how that turns out. And sometimes the second try is better than the first. Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Yes, ma'am?
Just a comment,
Yeah.
in light of the fact that it's International Women's Month, I think it's very
Oh.
fortuitous that we have this here because you're opening our eyes to
Yeah.
the reality of women's lives across the world, so I think that's.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so
That's-
I just realized that it coincided with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
fact subject, so thank you for telling these stories.
You're
Let
welcome,
me know them.
you're welcome. Thank you. But I just want one kind of final thing. Look, there is a lot of Ugandan women who are helping their other Ugandan women. And just as an example, Margaret, which is right there, is a retired nurse who opened up her own clinic just to help the village in terms of dealing with everybody who is sick, and really doesn't ask for payments, you know, just for them to contribute whatever they possibly can. And the same holds true for Clementina, the midwife. It isn't necessarily all these women struggling by themselves. There are other women who see where the need is and try to help. And God knows, there's a lot of delightful NGOs out there who are trying to make it work for them as well. And yes,
Are there women in the government?
yes, there's a few women in government, in
And
Parliament.
Are they advocates for lifting up women, or are they just part of the corrupt system?
Let's put it this way. What they say and what they do isn't necessarily coincides. Sometimes, yeah, because it's how does the money trickle down to where it needs to be
It
done
doesn't.
without somebody skimming it off as they keep going?
It doesn't.
Yeah, yeah. But anyway, again, thank you all for the wonderful questions.